So namaste and welcome to this monthly Satsang Q&A session. If you're new to the channel, every month we get online like this and go through the questions that have been sent in to be read out here in Satsang questions. And there's a few reasons why people would do that. The first is that they can't attend a Satsang live to ask me directly because of commitments or time zones being very different. Or secondly, that perhaps it's a question you would rather ask anonymously. Everything is always read out here in these recordings anonymously. So it's a good place to ask those questions if you feel a little shy also about asking um, on camera, on live on a satsang too. So if you'd like to submit a question, you can go to helenhamilton.org and click on the menu. And on the menu, you'll see the satsang items. You can also do the same on the Spanish website, Spanish Helen Hamilton, and you will find a similar page there to submit questions. Please try to make your question concise, but also sometimes not too concise. Sometimes people send in a question that's one line and quite vague, so it's a little more challenging for me to work with. So we'll go through all the questions that have been sent in today. We have quite a few to go through, and we have the wonderful Pilar here to read for me today. So Pilar, whenever you're ready, if you'd like to get started, thank you so much.
Thank you. Dear Helen, thank you for your teachings. I struggle with sleep issues despite of being healthy and following with good sleep hygiene practices. I find myself frazzled and exhausted throughout the day, which makes meditation difficult. I try to return to silence regularly, but being tired makes it hard. I know it is here all the time, but I seem to struggle to find it, which sounds silly. I am aware of tiredness. I sit with it, but I spend more time lost in muddled thoughts and exhaustion. Is it possible? It is possible there's something deeper going on, but I'm not sure how to access it via contemplation. Any advice is greatly received. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very common. People have some sleep issues, and it does make it more challenging with meditation if you're falling asleep, or even just to remember what to do in your spiritual practice if you are finding yourself feeling very, very tired. The first thing to do in any case is to look for any emotion around this. So the mind will say that you feel this emotion because you can't sleep properly, but actually, the sleep challenges are a reflection of an emotion, which is showing you the belief underneath. So, what emotions do you feel about this? Do you feel frustrated, perhaps, that you can't, for example, that you can't seem to resolve this? Or when you try to meditate and you're falling asleep, what emotion comes up there? Self, is it some kind of unworthiness that you can't seem to resolve this? Or, and I'm just giving examples from my own journey where I would struggle with an issue and there would be certain emotions that seem to come up in response to this. So, what is the emotion that happens with this? And then you can look at the belief behind that. Most often, when people have had some sleep challenges, it's been a reflection of fear. Fear of course, as being a separate being. The remnants of that is fear. And even if we've seen consciously that we're not a separate self, we are the infinite self, still these issues can actually become worse until we've really seen what's behind them. So if you think about it, and maybe you've already looked at this, but sleep is the ultimate kind of letting go, isn't it? We're relaxing and letting go into sleep, or the body is at least. And if we find that we don't feel safe somewhere deep down inside the gut still, then you'll find that there's going to be a challenge in letting go and going to sleep like this. It could also be a reflection of a sense of frustration or impatience or irritation outright anger, something like that, that you are unable to progress with this, something like that. So have a go with those. And if you need more help, please just write back in if you need more guidance. Thanks, Pilar.
Thank you, Helen, and your team from Venezuela. What do I have to let go of to stop being identified with the thoughts, sensation, and experiences of what I am not, and to feel fullness at every moment and thus see myself as I know I am?
Good question. And what if the only thing to let go of is the idea that you're the one identifying with thoughts? There's a belief here, right, that we can see that I feel I am the one identifying, and what do I have to do to stop that? I'm the one that goes back to mind and then comes back to the infinite self, consciousness, awareness, and then I go back to mind, and then I go back to the self. But what if that's not true? If you experience in a self-inquiry, and there's lots of videos here on the YouTube channel for self-inquiry, have a look and see. Um, there was a self-inquiry study sessions as well that'd be very, very helpful. If you have a look and see what you really are, it's formless and intangible and unchanging. It's good to check that out. If you are not changing, can you be the one that's fluctuating between the mind and the real self? So maybe that's simpler than we think. Are you the one that's actually identifying in the first place? Can you identify? Is that something you, the formless self, can do? If you get really interested in that question, there's going to be a profound shift that happens inside you. So, yeah, have fun with that too. Thanks, Pilar.
If I am all bodies, why is attention and identification only with this body mind? Why have I chosen to identify with this body when I am really all bodies? Thank you very much for your dedication, love, and wisdom. With much love.
So, why are we so sure that we're only identifying with one body? If I asked, I'm sitting here in my home recording this, if I asked every person on this street, which body is theirs, they would point to the one that I'm talking currently to. They point to their own body, what they think is their own body, and they would say this one, of course, and they might even look at me strange for the question, like, of course, this is my body. Um, so what if you are identifying with one body and mind in every body and mind? What if you're having the same idea, you, the infinite self, consciousness, presence, beingness? What if you're having the same idea in every human body? In every body, you're convinced that that body is your only body. What if you are really, because we only pay attention to one body and mind mostly, and we're concerned with the welfare of that body and mind because we think it's ours. But in every human body that you have, and currently you have 8.5 billion, let's say, something like that, you have this same idea, right, in every body and mind, that that one is yours. Have you ever met anyone, in fact, that said, yes, I have two or three bodies currently. One of them's over there and one's over here. And I know it sounds ludicrous as I'm saying it, but just to illustrate the point here, in every human body, you, the infinite self, are convinced that that's the only body you have. Something to ponder there. Hope that helps. Thanks, Pilar.
Dearest Helen, in every video I have watched, and I have watched a lot, when you work with people using inquiry or contemplative questions, you ask, how does that feel in your body? More relaxed or more tense? I have never heard anyone replying that the body is experienced with more contraction, and that is my lived experience. This phenomenon started 15 years ago, and no matter what, it has been attempted over the years, be it self-inquiry, meditation, somatic therapy, Western medicine, trauma therapy, spiritual or energetic healing, neurological testing, etc., the energetic contractions are even intensifying and increasing in duration. I have had to stop working and moving with a dear friend in order to be able to function with this intensity. I know myself as noticing when I look in the visual field. I plainly see nothing can be separate. I can readily hear there is no inside or outside in the auditory field, in quotes, and can easily notice the silence. It is clear that separate self is made of consciousness itself. However, there are violent contracted states in the sensory field that no amount of inquiry, asking if they believe these feelings are bad or if I am safe or separate is true, doesn't does anything to relax. This powerful tension seems to pulse against the openness verifying identification with and as the felt sense. In fact, the more open I rest, the more forceful in the contraction in the seeming opposite direction, like a black hole. I don't even like to claim this somatic experience is in a body, because that seems to gather the already insanely and painfully intense sensations and show them into a smaller container, the body, in parentheses, in quotes, making things even stronger. This almost is 24/7 experience, prevents sleeps and is present much of the time in the awakened state. Whenever the body is sitting or laying still, it comes rushing to the fore with a vengeance, making it impossible to lead any sort of normal life. I do not feel like I can or even want to stop it from happening, and yet it is so increasingly strong and painful. It causes the body to have physical repercussions like inflammatory conditions. A thought says, it can't possibly get more intense, and then it does. I can hear it, it is happening in silence. I can see it is happening within the here-ness, and yet it grows ever more painful and debilitating. Can you please shed some light or give guidance? Many thanks and blessings.
Yeah, so thank you for giving me the detail there. It helps me to kind of focus in on what advice to give, and it's something that you perhaps might have already done. So if you have, then disregard this first one. I'll go into some more things, but the first thing I would recommend doing is to question whether that you've used three words, consciousness, noticing, and silence as names for the real self. And so just really inquiring into, can the noticing, can the silence, can the consciousness be impacted by any phenomenon? So even this contraction, even something really painful in the body, even some really strong emotion or whatever is going on in an intense way in the body, does this affect you, the consciousness, the noticing of phenomena? And then to really come to see, so this would be the first thing, and I'd recommend doing all the things I'm going to say, really come to see that no thing, no phenomena can affect that which you really are, which is totally formless. It is that in which all phenomena appear, as you've said. Can you be impacted by this? Because once we begin to realize this, we begin to stop pushing so hard against this and wanting it to disappear. Of course, you would also like to feel better and be able to function better in the body, of course. And that's what we're looking towards here. So, can you, the real self, the noticing, be affected by this? It's really important. Obviously, the body is affected by it, but can you be affected by it? That's what I really want you to start with. Secondly, I would like you to look for any emotion that comes up around the fact that you can't function on your own right now at this point. Most beings might have some sense of failure, unworthiness, or sadness, or grief, or anger that seems to come up because you've had to move in with your friend. And in reality, this contraction might be a reflection of the emotion itself. This might be a way that your body's telling you there's some emotion still in there that hasn't yet been looked at. So, how do you feel about the overall situation? And do you feel any emotion coming up around it? Whatever emotions there are about that. I mean, for me, some patterns there was desperation, anger, self-blame, self-judgment. Why can't I sort this out? Why can't I resolve this? And the thing that I was trying to resolve was a reflection of this emotion. So we would then take that into our contemplation. We'd look for the emotion, realize it's not about the situation, it's just indicating some karmic pattern, some belief that still needs to be seen. So double checking. There might not be any emotion there right as the contraction is happening, but if you kind of zoom back out a bit and look at how you feel about the way your life is going because of this, at the very least, you have to be some kind of frustrated, right? That you can't live your life the way you would like to be, says the mind. In actuality, probably some frustration or some stronger emotion, perhaps even a deep sense of injustice, unfairness, anger, all of that. And then they would take that into contemplation. The third way, which I would also recommend doing all three, is to ask this contraction without judgment. And when this happens, or even whilst it's not happening, in between when it arises, this sensation, this contraction in the body, what it wants to tell you. So asking what it wants to tell you and asking as the noticing itself, not the mind. The mind is asking to try to get rid of it. And of course, you would like it to go. I'm not saying for a second you could reach a place in the mind where you're totally okay with it. But from that place, it is totally okay with it already, the noticing, the consciousness. Asking from a place of love. What is it you want to tell me? You can tell me anything you want, as if you were sitting with a small child who was really upset, really crying and sobbing. What would that child want to tell you before it could feel safe? And that's the kind of attitude we want to come to this with. Any one of those three will probably start to resolve this, but all three of them together will be a very powerful way to look at this and begin to let this. It's some energy that's stuck in the body-mind energetic system, as I'm sure you can feel, and it's going to begin to allow these frequencies to shift and to lighten, to enlighten, and then the body can cope much more with much more functionality then. But of course, right back in if you do need more help with that. Thanks, Pillar.
Number 5. Dear Helen, meeting you has been the greatest gift life could give me. Please, could you talk about emotions and karmic patterns? Infinite gratitude.
Thank you. Yeah, they are exactly the same thing. As I was just saying in the previous to the previous question, the emotions are reflections of our karmic patterns. Or we could say that a karmic pattern is a belief that we haven't seen as to be untrue yet, a thought that we're really giving a lot of attention to, an emotion, and a physical experience that keeps happening in the world. So for me, if we take the example, it was always lack of money. There would be this idea that I'm not safe. There would be fear, and then there'd be this same old repeating experience financially that happened. Karmic patterns are just a name for those three things together. Can't do anything about the outer world experience because it's not really outer. We can feel the emotion, but it's going to keep on getting generated until we inquire into the truth of the belief. So, for example, is it true I'm not safe? We use contemplation for this. And again, on the YouTube channel here, there's lots of great playlists for contemplation and a contemplation study session we did in depth live on Zoom one time, which you can work with there. So Karmic pattern is just a fancy name for a thought that is true, seemingly, when we think we are a separate person. It feels very true then. I'm not safe, or I'm not good enough, or I can't get what I want. We feel very limited, scared, unworthy, not good enough. We feel there's something fundamentally wrong with us. And as we begin to wake up to who we really are, we begin to see that this cannot be true for the infinite formless consciousness that we are. Can it be true that if you're beyond time and space, beyond form, that no object can hurt you, um, that you never were born and will never die? Can it still be true that you're not safe? Can it still feel true? So we might be seeing who we really are in our inquiry, in our meditation, but sometimes we have to do a little contemplation too, just to dissolve these old ideas that have seemed so very true, and our mind is so used to thinking in these old ways still as a separate being. So again, hope that helps. Dive into the videos here on contemplation. Thanks so much, Pilar.
In dreamless stage of sleep, are you aware of this state?
It's a question that comes in very often. I am awareness. I am infinite awareness. I can't be aware of anything. If I say I'm aware of the body sleeping, it's not really true because when I look at the body, I don't see a body. I see myself, the awareness, looking like a body. When I look at any object, I see awareness. I see myself. Um, for a little while in the changeover period, where we're changing over the way we think about ourselves from a separate self to recognizing we are the infinite awareness, it might seem like, and it did seem like for me, that I'm watching the body sleep. And at certain times, I was watching the dream happen at nighttime. Now I'm watching the waking state happen. But really, anything that arises from this infinite awareness, from myself, must be myself. And I've investigated this really deeply to come to seeing that anything I look at is the same as that which is looking. So any object of my perception is not really an object at all. The body is not really a body. Um, but for a little while, perhaps you might experience this, right? That it might seem like I'm aware and the body is sleeping. You can't turn awareness off. It's always on, even in deep sleep. And we begin to experience the same restfulness in the waking state, and we realize this, that what we really are. The same restfulness that we experience in deep sleep. There's just senses perceiving, awareness, watching through the senses, knowing that whatever we perceive is really our own self. And therefore, there's a lot of deep, deep peace. So, thanks, Pilar.
Hello, I want to connect with my being. Thank you.
Me too. In fact, everyone here. So, I would suggest if you're new to the channel and to these teachings, just diving in, watching the latest satsang that we posted. And also, you might want to dive into the self-inquiry material. It's the most direct way to connect with who you really are, to see who you already are, and very transformational to see that. Thank you, Pilar.
Question 8. Hi, Helen. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. It has provided me a much stronger basis for believing that abiding as beingness is possible for me. I live in the United States and I am very concerned about the issues affecting our democracy. I can see how my day-to-day life is a reflection of unresolved negative beliefs, and I am finding contemplation providing a positive effect on my personal life. Theoretically, group consciousness drives broad-based issues. Could you clarify my effect on issues in my country and the world and in my relationships with group consciousness? Thank you for your insights about this.
So glad contemplation is helping. It was a lifesaver for me. And if we want to go right to the root of it, there is no group consciousness. really, no individual consciousness. There's an individual expression happening as you, not separate, but individual, unique way that the infinite consciousness is expressing itself as you and me and all of these apparent beings. So I would ask you this question actually. Who is contemplating? Who is doing the practice? It can't be a separate self, right? It can't be the ego or the mind because it doesn't really exist, the separate self. Who's doing the practice then? Well, you, the infinite consciousness. And when I realized that, I got very, very excited. There's only one being doing the practice in many different bodies, increasingly. What effect does your practice have then on everyone else? Those nearest and dearest, those living in your country, those living on this planet, those that you would perhaps like to see change in, such as political leaders, etc. Um, it has every effect. It's not a separate self doing the contemplation. If we could only realize how important and how much effect it does have when we're doing this practice, that we're not a limited being contemplating affecting one body and mind, although, of course, it does help the one body and mind. If I were to ask a question, I feel the benefits here first. But let's make no mistake about where this contemplation is happening. Really, it's not happening locally in a place, in a body in the United States, right? It's the consciousness that's contemplating. And that should give you goosebumps, right? The infinite consciousness contemplating or inquiring or meditating or whatever it's doing. And that might seem strange to sit down when you sit down to contemplate or something and you realize this is happening everywhere, not somewhere, but it should give you some idea of just what is possible. Even if it was only happening in one body and mind, even if it was. And we've seen many examples of one body and mind still being revered for the spiritual work they've done thousands of years later. It's the name on everyone's lips, right? The Buddha and Christ and many, many other sages and saints. But those sages and saints had such a powerful impact because they began to realize that it's not a separate self doing the work. Is your spiritual work affecting anyone else? Everyone else. And that's exciting, right? That leaves us feeling empowered. And of course, we do want to see benefits in our own life from the practice, but when we realize there is no group consciousness, there is no individual um, consciousness, there's only individual expressions. The one being is doing the practice. And that's very, very important to realize. We can and are making a difference. The change that we want to see on this planet is already happening if we will realize the implications of seeing that there is no separate self. What does that mean then for your practice? It's exciting, right? Yeah. Thank you, Pilar.
Hello, Helen. In February 2024, I had an spontaneous spiritual awakening. At first, it caused me a lot of confusion and doubt. In brackets, I was not a spiritual seeker, and I didn't know that term until September 2024. Now I feel at peace and calm because I have been able to relate to what was happening to me thanks to the books I have read. Since that day, I have a high level of consciousness, bliss, ecstasy, and revelations, in which my ego is dissolving more and more each day. So much so that sometimes when I have a realization, my body cries non-stop and my mind or ego is in shock. But there is no pain or sorrow. There is nothing, just crying from the body. My question is, I have told my husband what I am in. He listens to me, but he doesn't understand me. And I see that he worries when I tell him my revelations. I also have two children ages 13 and 10. How can I live in the world without being in the world with a family to take care of? Is it better that I don't tell my husband about my process? And what happens next? What can I expect? I am totally ignorant. Thank you very much, Helen. With love.
And when I was waking up, my children were quite young still, and sometimes I would come running downstairs from meditation and tell them all these wonderful insights, and my family as well, my biological family around me, and it didn't always go so well, let's just say. And quite often, if someone is stuck in the sense of separation still and isn't ready to wake up, it can even be scary for them. So perhaps just noticing that, and connecting with the community here. We have a community that you can join if you want to be around people who are doing the same practices and waking up in the same way, dissolving what's left of the egoic structure into something much more fluid, as you were saying. Um, and people that can understand and have going through the same process that you can talk to. You're always welcome to join us. And you can find details on the website, helenhamilton.org. And that goes for anyone that's feeling they could use some companionship in this awakening, not just this particular questioner. So sometimes it's better not to say anything, but just to really just to come from the place of love and to wonder what would love say at this point. Sometimes it wouldn't say anything if it was going to cause more upset than anything else. Not that you're hiding anything, it's just we understand how convincing a sense of separation really is until it's not. If someone is really caught in that, for example, your husband, and you start saying things like, there is no separate self, there is no difference between form and formless, I don't exist, I'm not a person, that might be quite alarming, right? As to how to live in the world like this, why don't you ask that question too, right? How do I live like this? The mind will say, how do I live like this? It's impossible. But the consciousness would say, how do I live like this? And I had to feel my way into this bit by bit with my work at the time. I was cleaning houses for a living. I had four young children, as I was saying, a whole lot of debt and, all kinds of other stuff going on in my life. Feeling my way into it by dissolving the one who would freak out about how to live like this. There's self that we are, the real self. It's natural. It is our natural state. It's not some other state. It's what we've always been, and we're just coming to see that clearly. That's the only difference. And it's going to continue to dissolve. And a sense of who you really are is going to come to the forefront more and more each day. And eventually, you won't even be able to remember living like a separate self, or it'll be a very distant memory. Some emotion comes up. It's just another shape appearing inside the shapelessness that you are. And there's no capacity to suffer or even decide or choose, should I say something to my partner about this epiphany. Um, Even that is coming from a remnant of a separate self that thinks it can decide in that way. Recognizing you are your husband and yourself and your children. See which way the self wants to move. And in life, in human life, it usually moves in a very incognito way. Nobody would know if I go to the supermarket that I've had a deep seeing of who I really am. They wouldn't notice anything different about me. And the self really wouldn't want to say anything like that. It just wouldn't really be understood. But maybe people might just think you're a happy person to be around. You seem quite chilled out, relaxed, something like that. Kind, maybe something like that. But they really wouldn't know that you are an awakened being. As this sense of who you really are settles in more and more, it's not something new you're seeing. You're seeing it newly, meaning you're recognizing deeper now, but you have always been this. So the sense that something has really been revealed or that you've achieved something or you're seeing clearly, finally, that begins to fade away. And there's just this deep sense of this is all there's ever been about me. I have always been this. And then there's really no need to talk about it, right? You can, of course. But outside of recording videos like this or on classes, I'm not really having these kind of conversations when I go out in the world. And that's absolutely fine. It's so sweet to engage in your human life from here, recognizing that nobody's suffering, nobody's dying, even if we, of course, can't say that to them. Our very presence then becomes transformational for other beings, and we lessen their apparent suffering just by our very existence. So, more of the same to come, more joy, more peace, more bliss. Every time you think you can't handle the bliss, the body will adjust and you handle it. Every time the peace gets so intense, the body adjusts and you can handle it, and on it goes. So, doing what you're doing consciously and not really deciding what to say to anyone about this, seeing what your real self wants to say, probably not much at all. Just enjoying inside, right? The recognition of who you are is doing the best thing you can to help your husband and your children and everyone actually. So it's okay to be a incognito ninja awakened being, right? Not that we're sneaking around or hiding, but sometimes that's the kindest thing for something that might be very shocking. I'm sure you can remember how shocking it was for you when you first saw who you really are. And that same feeling will be happening in other beings if we're describing it to them and they're not ready. They don't have any mental framework or haven't have a community or a satsang to understand what's happening to them. So hope that helps. Thanks, Pilar.
Namaste, dearest Helen. Often I am paralyzed with fear when it comes to making decisions in the world. I don't understand it as I have a very clear sense of the unchanging in me. Please help.
It's very, very common. It's the same for me. I couldn't even decide whether I wanted tea or coffee, right? I couldn't. It was just paralyzing, even simple decisions. And I'd like to ask you, if you are unchanging, infinite awareness, are you making decisions? Usually, when we have some very strong emotion at this point, it's because the problem that we're trying to fix is not the real problem. Instead of trying to figure out how to make better decisions or the right decisions, or to make decisions without being terrified, let's ask if we are actually making any decisions at all. Can you prove that you're making a decision? Watch the process. Go into the kitchen and try to decide which thing you would like to eat with a simple decision, right? Not life or death or should I quit my job decision. Just put two options there and see which one. Eventually, the body will move to eat one of them. And a thought may pop up at some point that says, I'm going to eat this one. This one I'll have tomorrow. And is that enough evidence that you're making a decision? Because a decision thought arises, but who does it belong to? Is there any separate person that's deciding this, from which this thought arose? And all the previous thoughts, maybe I want this one, maybe I don't want this one. This one is better for me today. It's easier, it's quicker because I've got to work later. All the stuff that comes. Are you making any decision at all? Infinite formless consciousness, the unchanging self. How many decisions is it making? Is it capable of doing that? Noticing then that decisions are just arising spontaneously from the consciousness as a thought form, with nobody driving that. And that from there, no separate entity driving it, from there, the best decision always arises. Always. So maybe the problem's not what it seems to be. Check out and see, can you make any decisions? It's quite shocking, right, to admit I have never made a decision. They've always just arisen in front of me. But it's so relieving. That means you can't screw it up. So relieving. You can't mess it up. And that the highest decision is always the one that arises. The highest decision possible in any moment is the only thing that can arise from the infinite consciousness. So, thank you, Pilar.
Hello, Helen. How do I reconcile awakening with my material desires? Do I have to relinquish them? I work as a creative. And I love my work. I still have ambitions and desire for more material comforts. But all this feels egoic and stressful, as I must choose one or the other. I keep turning my back on awakening and then end up straight back into satsangs. Lol. Sending all my love. P.S. I adore contemplation and it has been a revelation to me. Thank you.
I'm so glad that you're enjoying the contemplation. I was laughing because I remember that same thing. I need and want more money. I want a car that doesn't break down every 20 miles down the road. Some bit falls off of it, right? But is that going against my awakening and, like you said, in and out of the path and eventually always back in satsang, watching some satsang on the TV and I'm back here again. I didn't even decide to come back. Right here I am again. So if there is no separate self, can these desires be egoic? Can they be against awakening? Can it be that you have to give them up? And it's true that the infinite formless consciousness has no desire. If you experience yourself as awareness or silence right now, you'll see there are no desires there. But we also have to admit that that infinite formless awareness is appearing as all of these forms, appearing as you, as a human being, looking like a human being. And when it comes into form, it does have desires. It does have many things that it wants. And as the infinite abundance of peace and clarity and joy and wisdom come clearer from the inside, deep peace, deep joy, all of those things, love and bliss and all of that. So too, if there's no outer world, there's no separate being separate to the outer world, abundance in the outer world must also manifest in every which way it can, not just one way. In fact, we could even say that awakening hasn't fully deepened until we're experiencing abundance in every area of our life. And let me just remind you of my definition of abundance, which is not necessarily stacks and stacks of excess of everything, but more than we need, everything we want and more than we need, so that we can never worry again about running out of anything, whether that's energy, patience, wisdom, clarity, peace, money, time, wellness, a good job, a place to live, all of those things. So they're not material. I mean, they are material desires, but they're actually a reflection of the infinite abundance inside. If you think about it, as we come to see our infinite nature more and more and more, does it make any sense to be limited, living in a limited, finite, lacking way in the outside? It has to even up. And that's what's wanting to happen with these desires. So it does and doesn't at the same time, the infinite self, it does and doesn't have desires. It's a paradox, right? But in your human existence, there's always going to be desire. Even a plant has desires to move towards the light, it grows towards the light. Animals have desires, human beings have lots of desires, and those desires are going to come back to the surface. Now you're beginning to realize that you're not limited by anything. And that only thoughts about limitation or unworthiness or lack of safety have stopped us from achieving those desires. And we don't have to make them happen either. We only have to recognize those desires, and the desire that we feel inside is actually the beginning of the manifestation, first into thought form, desire, from formless into thought form, subtle form, and then into an emotion. And if you feel guilty about having desires, it's going to manifest into something that you don't want, into the opposite of what you want. If you can enjoy those desires, feel good about them, it's going to show up as something you do want, more of what you do want. That's always happening as the formlessness is moving into form, desire is moving into manifestation. You can't stop the desires. You can't stop the physical manifestation either. The only control you have is how you feel about those desires, the middle step from thoughts to emotions, slowing down in vibration even more to physical manifestation. Something is going to show up, usually more lack, because we feel bad about having the desires. There is such a myth in spiritual pathways that desires are bad. So even if they feel egoic, we can really ask, why, what is it I really want? Do I really want a new car that doesn't break down all the time? Well, actually, no. I want to feel how safe I feel in a new car that's reliable. Actually, then I want to feel safe. Okay, and actually, I want to realize I've always been safe. If you track back these desires, you'll see it always comes back to a feeling that you want. So dive into your desires, embrace them, realizing that it's the infinite self, the consciousness that wants them. And usually we're wanting what we need to fulfill whatever we came here to do. And the first way that the infinite self does that is to shed itself, to rid itself of all these ideas of limitation and separation. And then the abundance comes to do what we want to do. The abundance can be allowed to appear in our lives for whatever that is. If you like to paint or do art, have at it, right? That's where your soul sings. So, hope that helps. Thanks, Pilar.
Hello, Helen. I have been wanting to live the truth for a long time. I feel that on the one hand, this truth has made its way to me into me, but on the other hand, my personal life has been in decline. I have been depressed for years without achieving stability in anything. No home, no social life, with very few economic resources. Beyond the fact that all of this may be irrelevant to the eternal being, and beyond the fact that it is only a reflection of my false belief, this really feels very real and painful to me. I have always tried to see if this situation would somehow be liberating, something that would elevate me to a greater detachment and freedom. I feel that in some ways it is, but I still suffer. I still wish for a more comfortable life experience and to be able to express and share the best of myself, but I can't expand in this life. I am so tired of not being able to live a minimal stability, tired of having to fight for the basics, tired of not having the courage. Sometimes it seems like everything is going to be harmonized, but everything falls apart. And if it were a joke, and there I am still watching myself struggle. I search again and again for the self, and I have felt that freedom, and that I have felt that freedom, but it is temporary. I want to trust, but things don't fix themselves, only in part. It's also as if knowing that this happy life exists without conditions only demotivates me even more to do and achieve things. I want to get out of this hell, or I want to know that I am not there. But I want to stop living like this, what to do or what not to do. Thank you.
I remember as I was listening to this being read out, I remember feeling that very same way. Um, and all my love and support is with you always, of course. When the infinite consciousness begins to recognize who it is, or even when it's really, really already recognized who it is, still for it to flow through and as our life, to express itself as our life in an abundant way. And abundance, again, I would suggest listening to the previous couple of answers because we covered this as well. Abundance it comes in inner and outer forms. So money, time, patience, energy, well-being, vitality, health, compassion, wisdom, all of those things. Um, and if we're not experiencing those in the way that we would like, more than enough, constantly, effortlessly more than enough of those things, any of those things, it's simply that the structure of our thought process is too rigidly stuck in separation still. The thoughts that we think are still in terms of a separate being. So the seeing is happening that I'm not a separate being. I'm not a finite entity. I'm not a form, even. I am formless, infinite consciousness, presence, the true awakeness, awareness, the pure subjectivity of the infinite self. And yet, the very next thought that we might have soon after that seeing is, why can't I let more money into my life, for example? Or why am I so tired all the time? Now, if you look at those two examples of thoughts, do they apply to you, the formless awareness, the real self, or do they apply to the body? And working with these in contemplation, if there are strong emotions, I would really, really suggest looking at the playlists here on contemplation, learning to work with the emotion to find the question that we need to ask. Because just because we have had this seeing of who we are doesn't mean our thought structure changes. In fact, I was very surprised to find it didn't change at all. I've been believing the huge myth, like everyone does, that I have some big seeing of who I really am, or even some small seeing of who I really am. And somehow magically that changed everything in terms of the manifestation of me. And it didn't. I had to look at the thought structure that was still in place. And all of my thoughts, only all of them, were still coming from the place of separation. Finally, I had to admit that actually I don't need money. I don't need sleep. I don't feel an emotion, all of those things. We're not denying what's going on here. It's not a denial. We're saying, in actuality, I need nothing at all, me, the formless self. My body needs sleep. My body needs food. My body needs money. My bank account definitely needed money. It was quite disastrous. But can that flow into my life? The things that I need, if I'm insisting that I need. There's nothing more opposite to what's actually true in reality for me than to say I need. First of all, whatever we really feel we need, whether that's money or time or energy or healing, the very feeling of need is implying a sense of separation from that thing, right? Can you sense that? If I need it, it's out there somewhere away from me. Or I need to get rid of something in here that I think is separate to me. When in fact, all objects are a way that I am showing up as the infinite self, as the consciousness, the presence. So, looking at the first problem you can give me, if we were able to sit together in a room and I say, what's the biggest problem going on in your life right now? Would you tell me something that applies to you, the formlessness, or to the form? And it's okay to notice that it'd be really, really helpful to have more money and more resources and all those things. But if you say, I need, then you're really reaffirming and restating. And I need feels so terrible because it's in separation, not because we actually need something, because it's in separation again. Your body is telling you every time you assert some thought or some words how true that is for you. I don't feel good enough. I can't seem to get to the end of this problem. I can't work out how to solve this. We think that we feel bad in the body because um, it is true. But actually, the body's telling us, I'm shouting at you right now. The body says that this is not true for you, the real you. So some discernment between what's true for you and what's true for the body and mind is really, really helpful here. Yes, you'd like your body to have more resources, but let's not feel that you need. And again, it's not a denial, it's just how we have to shift our thought process as an awakened being. For a long time, I had trouble sleeping, and I was so sure, long after awakening, I'm not getting enough sleep. I need sleep. I was almost at the end of my tether for 2 years it went on. Finally, I had to realize I don't need sleep. I'm not sleeping. I'm not waking up either. Finally, the body was able to reflect that as well. I don't need sleep, reflected as a body getting more than enough sleep and deep and peaceful, restful sleep. So the experience that we are always having is showing us what we're still believing to be true about ourselves, and it can be very, very subtle. So perhaps have a listen to what I've said here a few times, let it digest, and just, not like the mind would do. Oh, I have to examine every single thought now that I have. Ugh. Just coming to the next problem with a little bit of curiosity, like, actually, is this true? Is this my problem? Careful what you pick up as your problem. Do you have any? And see what happens to the reflection in the mind and body in the reflection. Thanks, Pilar.
Hello, Helen. I asked you about awakening. I have a recurring memory where I could not feed my family. And I ask myself, is it true that there is no prosperity in me, in my abundance? And the answer is no. That memory has no prosperity, it's only scarcity. And attention goes there, no matter how much I tell myself today it is true that money or abundance comes from the universe or God. And today I say, yes, it is true. But due to that memory, I can never feel that God or universe or energy have been here or there. I hope that you can understand what I express. I do not know if it was clear. I hope so. Greetings.
Thank you. So, if you look to mind and memory to prove to you what's true, it will always seem that this is not true, right? That you don't have enough of whatever current resource is needed. There'll always seem to be lack and limitation. What we have to do is come back to who we really are and let that define who we are and what we think is true. So, listening to the previous question as well that I've just answered, what could you be lacking? You are infinite, formless awareness. You are omnipresent, present everywhere. You are appearing as all phenomena. What could be lacking for you? What could you be missing out on? Is lack or not enoughness even possible for you? And you have to be more interested in this than this memory. Mind says, if you let go of thinking and this thought, you won't have enough resources. You have to remember that there isn't enough, mind says, so that you can be sure to get more. What if that's not true? What if only by experiencing your own infinite nature, that you have no edges, no boundaries, that you are everywhere, showing up as all creation? And only that, the recognition and the experience of your infinite nature, can there be anything missing from that? Only that recognition is going to turn this around. If I recognize myself to be formless and infinite, and then look at my finite, limited body and mind and let that dictate my thought structure, I haven't really seen who I am, because my body and mind are just ways that I am appearing then as form. Excuse me, as all of this form. You're showing up as all forms. What could be lacking for you? So you have to be more interested in what's real than what's unreal. And when the mind says there's not enough and you don't feel good, you have to really be curious. Self-inquiry is going to show you this in a deeper way. Experience who you really are. If you haven't done that as yet, a direct experience, not reading it from a book, not remembering what some other teacher had said or what I've said here, but actually inquiring directly into your own experience and seeing who you are. That's the only thing that's going to help you move beyond this. And it begins to change the thought structure then completely. And then abundance can flow then. So hope that helps. Thanks, Pilar.
Question 14. Hi, Helen. I hope this message finds you well. I have been separated from my wife for a few months now, and I am coming to terms of equanimity, of things just being as they are, so that I come into full realization that all is me happening within me. However, it is challenging at times because my wife still asks me for favors, and I am unsure how to respond to her. I am unsure whether I should just let things be and agree as they arise, or tell her that I don't have the time and not do her favors as she requests. I felt betrayed by love and trust that I gave her, but I have been forced into awakening to the true self of knowing that things are perfect as it should be. How should I respond to her request for her needing my help in certain situations, even though I know that there is one being essentially playing the parts of two bodies in this situation? Thanks for all you all you do in being a light and of hope for many. Thank you.
So, I can't tell you what to do, and I wouldn't want to tell you what to do. It's not my place to do that. But I can help you to see, hopefully, and to get you to question whether you're doing and choosing like this. If you're not the actual separate self, if you've seen that, or even if you haven't seen it fully yet, but it sounds like you're on your way to that at least, can you choose what to say? Are you choosing did you choose what to write when you sent this question in? Can you choose how to respond directly? Are you deciding in that way if there's no separate being? And if you experience who you really are right now, you'll see that you're not deciding anything. And most likely, this problem is a reflection of the idea that you are deciding. And it will go as you begin to remember or see clearly that you're not deciding at all. Decisions happen, and nobody's making them. For me, as awakening deepened, what I would do in certain circumstances, what my body and mind did or said to other beings, was often quite surprising and not what I thought it would be, and certainly not what it was as a separate, imaginary separate self. But the one thing that was prevalent in that it was never the same. Sometimes there was a very different response to the same person for the same thing. And there was no pattern there. There was just arising what needed to arise in that moment. So question if you're deciding here at all and recognizing, remembering that you're the one being appearing as both of these bodies, you and your partner, your ex rather. It helps not to say that to the other being, of course, unless they're also on the path, but just to know that and remember that within yourself. Can you have been betrayed by another being? And of course, this doesn't excuse the behavior of some beings. But if we're thinking in terms of me and another being, then we haven't really fully seen clearly yet. It needs to go a little deeper what it means to be you, the formless, infinite self, in which there is no other being. And then you can begin to experience the relationships, the circumstances that you really want. So, again, if there's strong emotions, taking a look at contemplation here on the YouTube channel and diving into that, questioning the belief behind those emotions to help. But most of all, to see there are no other beings and that our experience is reflecting what we're believing to be true. If I think I'm having a problem with another being, can it ever really resolve fully? Not so much, right? If I recognize I am the one being expressing itself as two bodies, then things can begin to shift. Thanks, Pilar.
Hi, Helen. I feel hesitation asking this question in the group, so I am asking anonymously and hoping to get guidance from you. I am listening to the extra resources about sex, and I have a question around it. I have an amazing spouse life partner, but somehow we don't have a sex life or say intimacy through coming together in this way. We are soulmates, but for some reason there is this resistance to this kind of intimacy. We are romantic in other ways and very close to each other. But I think there is a feeling of shame, unworthiness, or fear or disappointment which reflects as resistance. Now it shows up as laziness, even to put effort. I do not know how to break this barrier. I have complete openness, as there are not two, just one expressing itself. I have come to a point where I understand that all desires are of the one. So looking forward to your response. Love you a billion times.
Love you a billion times back. Thank you. It was very much similar for me. There were a lot of negative emotions coming up around this area, even as I began to see who I really was. And for many of us, we can have still shame showing up in our lives about how our bodies look. Our capacity to be intimate is going to be inhibited by those kind of emotions, right? So, first of all, to check if you do have desire for sexual intimacy, for physical intimacy, then that's great. And looking at what's holding that back is usually some negative emotion, unworthiness you mentioned here. So, really beginning to question that. And if you have already used contemplation, great, maybe coming back to it. Most people, when it comes to sexuality and sex, then it's usually shame, some deeper sense, which is similar to unworthiness or guilt, but kind of a deeper, more heavier energy, quite often hard to see. Um, and sexual intimacy is about the most exposed we will be in terms of intimacy, right? With another being, even if we love and trust that being. So, of course, we're going to want to avoid it somehow unconsciously. So, if you don't have any desire for intimacy in this way, that's fine too. But if you do have desires and you can't seem to fulfill those desires, um, then just looking at why that is. Usually, it's a fear of judgment or a sense of shame that's happening that inhibits the even the desire. The desire might be there, but very weak. And when we actually think about being intimate, we might feel all kinds of self-judgment coming up in that area. So looking at what thoughts you have around this, looking what emotions you feel around this, knowing that it's very, very normal. Um, every event that I do, there's always one question that sneaks right in at the end about this particular subject. Or someone will slide it on a piece of paper to me with no name. It's just there when I come back from being somewhere else. We come back to start the next session because they're so ashamed. And really, it's a natural part of human life. Human beings are quite strange in that way, right? We have a lot of shame around something that is really quite natural and even necessary for our physical survival. But as the love deepens of who you really are, this shame will be overcome. So just looking at what the emotion is, and we can begin to enjoy physical intimacy, like any form of intimacy, as an expression of the oneself, uh, falling more in love with itself and wanting to express that on a physical level. So contemplation would be really, really helpful. Our self-inquiry, seeing that there really aren't two beings being intimate. Intimate is a word that suggests two, and there isn't really a good word for the one being expressing itself in this way. If you find one, let me know. So, hope that helps. Thanks, Pilar.
This is the last one.
Thank you.
Dear Helen, many thanks for being there with me and reminding me the flow of an existence of being. In the Barcelona retreat, you gave me the truth that there is no need to know, to be without knowledge. Accumulating knowledge is an impossible task. If I don't know, a space of calm and rest opens up, but also of anguish. My love for knowledge, for learning, where will all that be now? I feel hungry. This feeling comes to me also of malnourishment. Can you help me to understand and navigate this moment? Thank you.
I remember the same thing myself. It was clear that I didn't know anything. It was becoming clearer, and there was no thing to know. Everything that I would look at would be myself. So, how could I know anything? How could I learn anything? There was nothing new to learn, right? And on some level, at some point, I was deeply restful. Like you said, I can finally stop seeking and searching. And um, but then this hunger arose again to kind of begin to deepen again. I began to see that we can play with the known, knowing it's not true. I can seem to learn. I can seem to read another book and deepen in my understanding, or attend a satsang or a class or whatever. And the mind is broadening its understanding. The manifestation of me is deepening into this awakening, which is really just a play happening in front of me. There's no deepening if I'm already infinite. But isn't that why we're here? To savor that deliciousness of deepening in the seeing of who we are, learning, reading, watching, engaging in practice, even in the world as well, learning new things. embracing, all of that still continues. In fact, it continues even faster because you realize you're not the one doing it. And that the sense of what we can know and learn and accumulate is just a sense, but still we can play with it. There's no need for any of that to stop. But it's coming not from a desperate search to try to find out who we are. It's not like I need to attend this satsang so that I can find out who I am finally. It's I'm attending this satsang because I would really like to just immerse myself in myself with some of my other bodies too, right? And we felt that in Barcelona. It was just like, okay, we're just sitting together, all of us. And through all of these bodies asking questions and answering, it's all becoming clearer who we really are. At the same time, we already absolutely know everything there is to know, and there's nothing to know. So enjoying the contrast of I'm absolutely already completely as I am. There's nothing to know, nobody to know it. And at the same time, I'm in this seeming process of becomingness and deepening and learning and growing in the manifestation of me, and that will never stop. And that satiates that hunger, but it's driven by devotion to truth, not seeking, not separation. It's driven by your devotion, right? To want to deepen in what you've already seen. If you were eating the most delicious cake you've ever had in your entire life, and I said, "Would you like another piece, another forkful of this?" You would say, "No, thanks. It's delicious, but I don't really want any more." You'd be like, "Yes, please." So every day more deliciousness is given to us in this process. But it's coming from joy, from devotion, from passion, from truth, from expansion, apparent expansion and manifestation, not from desperate seeking and clinging and striving and struggling and efforting and suffering. And that's what wants to emerge. And that's that anguish now, right? I want to let this out. Every day for me, the experience is deeper and deeper. And that's happening against this background, this total knowing that nothing is really happening, and being able to enjoy both. So, if you're hungry, then satiate that. But it's coming from this deep devotion, this fire inside, right? And that fire only gets stronger, actually. So, I hope you have enjoyed all of these questions and answers. And like I said before, if you have any question that you want to send in for next time, sometime around the end of March, we will do another one of these. Please try to keep your question concise and to the point, but do give me enough detail to help me know what you're asking for help with. And we will see you there. Thank you very much, Pilar, for reading for me today. It's wonderful. Thank you. Namaste.